I think it's a great place to start in talking about boundaries and what they are and what they aren't. We spoke about this in another podcast, but the Jonah Hill example where it was revealed that the boundaries he set were sort of dictating whether his girlfriend at the time could go surfing with men, and he was claiming that that was a boundary. So, Georgia, do you mind letting us know what an actual boundary is?
So, a boundary is a request or something that we set in relation to someone or something else. Often it follows this process of feeling into a need or a want or a desire, something that will be useful for us, and communicating that or making it happen. I think it's really important that we distinguish the difference between a boundary and asserting control over someone, because often we can hear this talk or these ideas weaponized against people, and then it kind of backs them into a corner. And if you hear someone say, this is my boundary, you have to do this for me, it feels really hard, because I think a lot of people want to be respectful and kind to their partners. So that's why this Jonah Hill example is so distressing, because he has done a lot of his own therapy, and I think he has a lot of the language and the
Mm.
tools to use. And in this case, we saw a request that he was making for his partner to not, she was a professional surfer, right?
Yeah.
She was a professional surfer and model,
Yeah,
already.
yes, yeah, and requesting that she wouldn't go out and surf in an ocean with men, and that she wouldn't wear specific bikinis.
Mm.
And to frame that as, that makes me uncomfortable that you were in that context and you are wearing that thing, and this is a boundary. Instead, what could be a useful way to approach it is, hey, I'm noticing an insecurity in me, or I'm noticing my own jealousy when you're out there. I recognize that that's my stuff, because this is your career and this is your body. So I'm going to take that jealousy and that insecurity and I'm going to work on it.
And just to stay with you for a little bit longer, Georgia, what does a boundary look like in a sexual context?
Yeah, so a boundary could look like many different things. And that might be, hey, I really want to connect with you sexually tonight, but I don't want to take our clothes off. Is there
Mm.
something that we could do on the couch? Or it could be, I know that it's a Tuesday night and this is usually our night that we have just the two of us, but actually I'm really tired and I don't think I can be sexual right now. Or it could be, we're kissing and our clothes are off, and halfway through I realize that actually this isn't feeling good. Maybe it's because I'm really in my head, or I'm stressed, or something's happened and I just don't want to do this anymore.
Mm.
Can we pause? Can we stop? But then it could also be on a first date. Like, I know we've just kissed and I know we were about to walk home together, but actually I don't want to go home with you anymore.
Yeah, it's incredible to hear you articulate it so well, and it makes it so easy to understand. I always find whenever I'm listening to podcasts or watching videos or reels or whatever it may be, that hearing examples is so helpful, like healthy examples. So without putting too much pressure on Campbell or you or Meissa, can you think of a time that you set a healthy boundary and how did it feel?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I can think of so many times. I think part of growing up, part of being an adult, whether it's a very short-term relationship or a very long-term relationship, I think there are a lot of instances that you have to set boundaries or that you do set boundaries. And I'm very lucky that I'm with somebody that I feel very comfortable setting those boundaries. But yeah, there are absolutely times where we've been doing something and I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. And maybe we do something else. Maybe we don't do anything at all, or I really want to have sex and my partner doesn't. And, having to navigate their boundaries as well, and understanding that, it doesn't elicit some kind of lack of connection, that there are a multitude of reasons why someone might be asserting a boundary or not giving consent for whatever reason, in whatever circumstance. I think navigating that is very much a part of growing up.
Fantastic, Campbell. Thank you, by the way. And how about you, Meissa?
Outside of a kind of relationship context, I personally lately have been setting a lot of boundaries with family members.
Okay.
So not obviously like a partner, but I think it can still have some of the same expectations of what you should do for a person because they're a family member, or I don't know, just I would just say expectations, really. Expectations and what you should do or how you should behave. But I think as well, now being an adult, I'm kind of learning more how to navigate that rather than being a kid when people just tell you where you have to go, what you have to do or whatever.
Yeah.
And having the agency to decide for myself what I do or don't want to do, or how I react to something, or whatever the situation may be, but setting healthy boundaries with family members as well.
How do you go about identifying yourself that, oh, this is a boundary I need to set?
I'll give an easy example, and I did have this recently. But I have a lot of family members sometimes ask me for loans, and I had to put a boundary in place for one of my uncles, and I was like, you're asking me for loans too much, too often, and I can't give you money this often. And I feel like it's getting to the point where you're asking an unreasonable amount and that it's not a regular amount. And he was very fine with it. He's like, oh, I'm sorry, like, my baby, I didn't mean to treat you like that. He was very lovely about it. But I was very direct in how I spoke to him, and I was like, I'm so sorry, but like, I can't be giving you money this often, and you're asking me too much that I don't think it's a reasonable amount or a respectful amount. And I had to put that boundary in place. And I have done that with other family members who never pay me back. I don't give them loans no more. But,
Yeah.
but I think some stuff like that outside of relationships, it's another example of like when you have to set boundaries with somebody, and it might be a bit awkward. And obviously the dynamic was a bit different because it's like my uncle as well. But it's still, you still have boundaries with non-relationship people or non-partners.
Yeah, absolutely. And same sort of question to you, Campbell. How do you go about identifying them internally before they need to be set?
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky. I think, unfortunately, in a lot of instances, we learn our boundaries from when they're pushed. I think sometimes we learn our boundaries in hindsight of a situation. And that's definitely unfortunate, but I think it goes to show that exercising boundaries is it's like exercising a muscle. You kind of have to learn and practice, and you get a little bit better at it over time. As far as identifying them, it's a lot of introspection, I guess. But yeah, I think it takes time, and I think having strong boundaries and being able to express those is a really powerful thing. I always say that, like, I'm not a yes man. I have no trouble saying no to something I don't want to do. But you know that when I say yes to doing something for you, it's because I want to do it. I'm expressing my love or my gratitude or whatever for you. If I'm doing something for you, if I'm having sex with you, like, when I'm saying yes to these things, it comes from a genuine place, because if I didn't want to do it, I wouldn't. I'd say no. And I think that's maybe another way of framing boundaries and saying no to things, is that you're showing how significant it is when you do say yes.
Yeah, that's a really good way to look at it, actually. When you're working with clients, do you find that most people figure out where their boundaries are through experience, or like, something's happened to them and they've gone, oh my gosh, I can't let that happen again? Or is it through introspection?
Yeah, I guess it's all of that, really. And I think that it kind of depends on the area that we're working with. So it would be a different approach if someone is living and working with trauma and someone isn't. So if there's trauma present, what we really need to do is learn about what they can do to create a safe space for them to really practice and recognize what it feels like to be in a safe space. Because often if it is sexual trauma, then the concept or the experience of sex can feel incredibly triggering. So that might be that they need to take sex off the cards and just come back to learning what feels safe. And that might even just be spending time in their body. And that might be solo time, just recognizing sensations in their body. But then it's kind of different if we're not living and working with trauma and they're not going to be out of their window of tolerance, or they're not going to be triggered by sex. Sometimes what can happen is sort of we've learned, you don't know that you've met a boundary till you've actually met it. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad or traumatizing or triggering thing. Like, it certainly can be, but it can happen during sex all the time, where someone might say something and you think, oh, I actually didn't want to be called that during sex. Or they might touch a body part and you don't necessarily like it, or it might be a certain, pressure or speed. So it is okay if we figure out boundaries sort of as we're going. But then I guess when we're learning to practice it, I think a lot of that can be practiced outside of a sexual context. And we really live in a world that doesn't support us to assert boundaries. I think many of us grow up, and when we're a young person, we might be told to go hug or kiss auntie and uncle or grandma or grandpa. And, even if we don't want to, it'll be, it's the rude thing to not go and do that. So that's sort of ingrained in us from a really young age that we don't have agency and we should just do things to make people happy. So that's a big part of, and I think that's a big barrier that people face in asserting their boundaries, is the fear that they might upset someone and upset the person who they probably want to make feel really good, which is the person who they're having sex with, or people.
Do you feel like, Campbell, in that example of, childhood, I think is such a relatable one. Do you feel like there are gender differences in like the way we're socialized, being brought up in those contexts?
I guess it's probably the things that we're expected to say yes to doing are different between boys and girls. I guess girls are often, expected to dress a certain way, and boys are expected to dress a certain way. And if you are to assert boundaries over those sort of like assumed gender expectations, it can be quite controversial and sometimes hard for people to accept, but it all sort of comes under that same umbrella of what you're comfortable doing.
Absolutely. Meissa, how about the experience? You don't have to think of a specific example, but when someone sets a boundary with you, how does that feel, and how do you react to it from your experience?
This will be a theme throughout this whole thing, but I'm a big fan of direct communication. So I do really like if someone, like, I never obviously want to cross someone's boundaries, but if I ever did, or I did something that they would like differently or whatever, I would very much like to be told. And I like direct communication. I would tell someone, if I trusted them, obviously, like I would tell them as well. So I would react positively. I'd be like, thank you for sharing that with me. And also thank you for being so direct. I feel like I've had probably friends in the past in high school and stuff, not where I've like broken a boundary, but I feel like they were just not very upfront with a lot of their communication, and it had issues sometimes. So I would very much appreciate vocalizing boundaries and having that clear, well, just the clear communication, so we both know we're on the same page. I know that you don't like that, I will not do that again. Or I know that you didn't like that phrasing or something, whether it's big or small. I would like to be told, and I would react in that way, and I'd let them know. I'd say, thank you for telling me this. And if there's anything else, feel free to vocalize.
Yeah, I can relate to that so much. Like finding out after the fact that you made a joke that was too far for somebody, or that you did something that they didn't like. Like finding out after the fact that you pushed that boundary really hurts and really sucks, and you wish you could go back and change it. And in that sense, it's like it really is a kindness to communicate your boundaries with other people, and it is a sign of respect. And I think I would like to know, as quickly as relevantly possible, that I don't want to push anybody else's buttons in a way that isn't fun and friendly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's really, I really admire people who set boundaries. Like, even if it's leaving dinner and a friend is like, I'm tired, let's go.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, that is so cool, because, I can also see in myself where I might sort of delay it a bit, or just, be like, oh, is this too much to ask? Like, and that's a big thing that I've really had to work on in communicating my own boundaries. So when I see someone assert them or tell me what they want, it really means that, like, I feel like I can really trust them. That, as you were saying before, like, if we're going into something, I know they're as excited about it, and as soon as they're not excited, then it'll end, and that's great, and we'll all feel good at the end of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like this is going to sound obvious, but respecting boundaries that are set, with you is rooted in respect in general. And Meissa, do you find that, because obviously in some cultures and First Nations people in particular, respect is sort of everything. Respect for yourself, your family, and for your elders. Does that deep sense of respect reflect the way you respond to boundaries?
I would say
Yeah,
I would say it's definitely kind of how you're describing, as underpins a lot of the way I navigate the world in general. So it definitely, I think, is a large aspect of how I navigate relationships too, whether they're like sexual or partners or friends or family.
Why do we think it can be so hard for some people to set boundaries, Campbell? Like, how could we practice, normalizing standing up for our own limits?
I mean, I think we don't want to let people down. And I think it all kind of just comes back to that, really. It's like, someone's really excited about something and you don't want to let them down, so you do it anyway, or you get caught up in the moment and you do it anyway. And I think that something that's so important is maybe just like having that conversation earlier in the piece, like before things get hot and heavy, before things get crazy, or before you get stuck into something potentially that could become uncomfortable. Some people fear that consent or talking about consent will be a mood killer. But maybe you can kind of, consent can be pulled at any time, but maybe you can have the conversation at the start. That's like, if at any point in time you want to stop or you want to change things, like, please tell me it's a safe space to do so. And then people will know that you can revoke and change how you feel at any time. And that, you can let people know you're not going to be letting me down. I want you to have a good experience with this. Or if you're asking for a favor, I only want you to do this for me if you can, if you want to, maybe at a time when you're not asking for a favor. So the precedent is set.
Yeah.
And then it just makes the whole process a whole lot easier when you get around to it.
I feel like that experience of not wanting to let people down is exacerbated so much more when it's in like a sexual context, because then my experience that it feels so much more personal. Like, oh my God, this person is going to I think they're not attractive, or I'm not attracted to them. And I always feel like I don't want to make them feel that way. Do you see a lot of that in your work?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. That's one of the big ones that people will share, which is, I really am attracted to this person and I want it and I want to have a good time with them, but for whatever reason, I just don't in this moment. And I'm nervous or worried that by me saying no or pause or stop, they are going to think it's about them being a bad lover or me not being attracted to them. But this could also come from messaging that they have received from their partner as well. So what might happen, or what might have happened in the past, they might have said, hey, look, I'm just not really into it. And then the partner feels rejected and sad. And then they might just be like, okay, and physically respect it and stop. But then they might turn over and curl in a ball, or they might sort of storm out the room, or they might not talk to them for a few days. So whilst they didn't continue having sex, there were repercussions after that led to more disconnection. And so someone in that moment might be thinking, is it just easier for me to continue this for a few more minutes and to endure this, rather than to voice it, because I know that the next hour or days is going to feel really disconnected and uncomfortable. And that's kind of what is going through their mind often. Has any of those ideas ever come up before? Or
While we're on that, can we kind of label those behaviors as abusive? And not as like, oh, my boyfriend just acts this way. Like, it's actually not cool for someone to react that way if you revoke consent. You say, oh, actually, I'm not feeling like that. And if your boyfriend gives you the silent treatment, or partner, if any partner gives you the silent treatment, or then ignores you or treats you badly because you said that, that is abusive and it's not normal behavior.
Yeah.
And I think we should very much label that obviously right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great call.
Yeah, because we are talking a lot about like how to communicate your boundaries in a friendly way, in a nice way. But also sometimes, like, if your partner is going to respond to your boundaries in an abusive way like that, I think it's perfectly okay to take the friendliness of it out of the equation. If it's a safe space, you can just, I think it's the safest or healthiest option in those instances might be to disengage from that relationship and to pull things away. You don't always have to be, if you're not being respected, you don't have to be a people pleaser. You can as I said, when it's safe, step away. You don't have to be conserving the feelings of the other person if they're not conserving yours.
yes, yeah, absolutely. So when we are talking about boundary setting, what we will be doing is we will be looking at the verbal and non-verbal ways to respond to a boundary as well. Because as you mentioned, like, we could give language or we could give different approaches for how to actually communicate a boundary. But if that isn't being met in a safe environment, a respectful environment, that language is useless to this person. So we need to work with everyone. And I think that a lot of people wouldn't recognize it as abusive or coercive or manipulative, because they're so consumed by their own shame or their own rejection or their own sadness. And they don't see the harm that they can be causing to this person. They don't see how they are actually not creating a safe environment within their relationship, for allowing this person to be able to communicate consent.
And I think it's okay to pull yourself up on being the person who is being upset because they've been rejected. Like you know, it's not acceptable behavior, and you do need to be accountable for it. But I think if you're learning and you look back at these experiences where you're like, oh, I was kind of not very nice that time that my partner told me they didn't want to have sex for the first time, and learn and apologize and try to do better next time. I think we all make mistakes. I think that's really important, not to write yourself off. Like, you can learn from that experience and hopefully, you know, show more empathy and kindness in the future.
That's like the best case scenario. It's like the introspection after.
Yeah.
Everyone should have that.
I think we're so
Think about it
afraid of
more.
introspection, of
Yeah.
like pinning ourselves as the bad guy sometimes. But like, you know, some mistakes are really egregious, but for the most part, it's okay to make mistakes as long as you learn from them afterwards.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful way to look at it. And I feel like with what you pointed out, Meissa, like those abusive behaviors, and if you're not setting a boundary out of fear that they might happen, then obviously, you know, and you continue engaging in the sexual activity, then there's no consent there. What if, and this maybe it's a bit of a personal question, I might need to book an actual session with you, Georgia, but what if you don't assert that boundary, not out of fear that that person's going to have those abusive responses, but just back to that, I don't want to upset them. I personally would feel then kind of weird saying that then I've put myself in a position where I've had sex without consent. But I guess I'm maybe asking, like, what's your advice if you have that kind of, you blame yourself for not setting the boundary?
Yeah, well, firstly, I would bring compassion, a lot of compassion to that, because, you know, you would do it, whoever we're talking to, were doing whatever you were doing in that situation probably because you haven't had access to sex education, because not many of us have, or consent education, but also because a lot of the education that we did receive also wasn't pleasure focused. So often we do have these messages that around, you know, endure it, or, you know, it's okay if it's kind of painful, or some, you know,
It'll be over soon. Like,
yeah, don't worry, just, you know, make them happy. And I think that, like, even like glossy magazines would often have messages like, you need to do this for your partner X amount of times to keep them happy. So I think rather than blaming yourself, let's bring compassion, and also, like, let's zoom out as to all of the other reasons as to why you may have stayed with an experience. I also think it's probably useful to make a distinction between wanting and willing, and this is still within consent. So a consensual sexual experience. So let's just park the I endured and come back to, like, you're consenting. There are two different ways that we can have sex, or we can touch and receive touch. And one of them is wanting. So I am wanting this and it is for me. So I have asked for a specific kind of touch. I really, really want to receive it, and that's for me. But then we have willing, and that is, I'm still consenting, but I'm doing it for you. I'm giving you a kind of touch. I'm giving you a kind of an experience. And that can still feel good for me. Like, I can feel excited and pleasure and useful and all of those things. But it allows us to think about different kinds of touch or different kinds of sexual experiences and the roles we may be playing. But then let's also park that idea, and that's kind of different to, I guess, if we are talking about what do I notice when I've endured it. And I think that that's a really important conversation to have. And that might be, hey, I noticed that last night I actually continued having sex even though I was distracted, or even though I wasn't into it. And I really want to talk with you about it, because I know you don't want me to endure, but these are certain cues that maybe you could look out for, or maybe these are ways that we could check in during, so that we're both just really excited, or we're both into it the whole time.
That is really helpful, and such a thoughtful response. Thank you. It's made me feel a lot better.
The Teach Us Consent team respects and honours Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander elders past and present,
and their enduring connection to this land.